More than 67 million Filipinos have registered to vote in the elections on May 9th to elect their next president and vice president. Leading in the polls is a former Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr, also known as Bongbong. He is the son and namesake of the country's late dictator. His closest challenger is current Vice President Leni Robredo, who has hosted huge political rallies in recent days. Joining us from Manila is our Philippines correspondent Raul Dancel. Raul, let's have a closer look at the two main presidential hopefuls. Where do they stand on the big issues?
This election is not about issues. It's more about personalities, legacies, history. To understand why, we have to look at the candidates. Candidate number one, and the one that polls say will likely win by a landslide, is Ferdinand Marcos Jr, the son of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. To recall, the Marcoses fled the Philippines in disgrace in 1986. That's more than 36 years ago, after a military-backed civilian revolt. The revolt happened because people just got tired of all the killing, of all the stealing that happened under Marcos Sr. Anyway, since the Marcoses returned in 1992, they have been trying to correct that great injustice that they believed happened to them in 1986. They believe that 1986 was a mistake. They believe that it wasn't really a revolution, but a coup by a minority. They insist that what happened during the reign of Marcos Sr. was a period of prosperity, of peace, of growth, that martial law happened only because Marcos Sr. didn't want the Philippines to fall into the hands of communists. Anyway, that's been their narrative through all these years now. And Marcos Jr. has been aiming for the presidency precisely to push that narrative. He thinks that he believes strongly that if he is elected president, that will mean that a rejection of the 1986 revolt, and that people have finally come around to believing in their version of history, that they suffered a great injustice, that the Marcos regime was marked by prosperity, of growth, of peace, and that maybe it's time that the Philippines go back to that period. Now, interestingly, the Marcos Jr.'s top rival is Vice President Leni Robredo, and she is right now the heir to the pro-democracy movement that ousted Marcos Sr. in 1986. And so what we're seeing right now in our election is like a redo of the 1986 electoral race between Marcos Sr. and the pro-democracy movement back then. So in summary, the election hasn't really been about the economy, about politics, but more on a relitigation of the 1986 People Power revolt. And by all indications, people are coming over to Marcos Jr.'s side.
So, Raul, on that note, let's talk about what voters want. After 6 years of a Duterte presidency, what are the voters looking out for from the next person who moves into the Malacanang Palace?
Well, Marcos Jr. is popular because he has been styling himself as the successor of the current president, Rodrigo Duterte. He is right now saying that he will be a continuity of what Mr. Duterte started. And this means, who was Duterte? Duterte was a candidate who styled himself against the oligarchy as a populist leader, as a leader who will be good for the poor. And so Marcos is towing essentially the same line. He's promising the people that if he is elected president, there will be great change in their lives. There will be prosperity for them. Salaries will increase. The country will remain drug-free and crime-free. And so they're expecting that from Marcos. In fact, from any other candidate. But right now, it is Marcos that they see who clearly has their interest in mind.
So just to get it right, Raul, what you're saying is Bongbong Marcos is set to win the next presidential election.
Herianto, polls say that he will win by a landslide. Polls are sometimes wrong, right? But in the past, when polls are wrong, usually the gap is within the margin of error. But this time around, Marcos's lead over Ms. Robredo is by over 30 percentage points, which is a big gap to surmount. Anyway, Robredo's camps are positive. I think that the numbers are wrong, that it does not reflect what's really happening on the ground. They look at the massive rallies that Robredo has been able to organize, and the spirit of volunteerism. The volunteers that that Robredo has managed to mobilize. They think that there is a good chance, that the gap between Marcos and Robredo are closer than what polls show. But if I was a betting man, I would put my bet, of course, on the odds-on favorite, which is Marcos Jr. And so we're looking at another Marcos to lead the Philippines in the next 6 years.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see for the election come Monday. Thank you so much, Raul, for your insights. Philippines correspondent Raul Dancel. For all the latest news on the Philippine elections, you'll find our stories at str.sg/Asia. And we'll be chatting with Raul again when the results are out.